So till now we have discussed about various methods in psychological inquiry, and we have also discussed pros and cons about each method of inquiry and measurement. But now we will be discussing about some general problems faced by psychological measurement. So the first one is lack of true zero point. So, in physical sciences, subjects like physics, the measurements do start from zero. Okay. For example, suppose you want to measure the length of your table, so definitely there is a point zero, and then you can measure it up to 3 from the point zero. Okay, but in psychological measurements we do not have a zero point. Why? Because suppose we want to measure intelligence level of a person, IQ level of a person. So no person in this world has zero intelligence. Okay, so those people who are intellectually challenged people, okay, those people also, they also have some level of IQ. It may be lesser, way lesser than how much you have, but still it's not zero. It cannot be zero, it's not possible. Okay, so so that is one thing. Okay, so as a result, whatever scores we get in psychological studies are not absolute in nature, rather they have relative value. That's why in psychological testing also, like I said, that there is a norm built. Okay, a group of people, the score an individual test or score of a group of people, it's always compared with a particular norm. Okay, and the norm is the score of a particular group, uh, which is already there, so that we can compare it with those whoever is taking the test. Okay, so the norm has been built. So psychological measurement is always relative. It's not absolute in nature because it doesn't start from the point zero. So now the second one is a relative nature of psychological tools. Okay, so psychological tests are developed keeping in view the salient features of a particular context. Okay, so if a test is developed for students living in urban areas, it may contain items which are familiar to someone who is living in an urban area. Okay, like probably about cars or buildings, which is not familiar for someone who is living in rural areas. Okay, so such a test will not be suitable for use with children living in rural areas, tribal areas. Okay, they will be at more ease identifying flora and fauna, your natural environment things. Okay, and is vice versa. So the things which are easily available in rural or tribal areas, the students from urban areas, they may not be aware of such things. So if a test is developed keeping in mind with people from rural areas, it may not be suitable for those who are living in urban areas. Okay, so similarly, if a test is developed in America keeping in mind the culture of Americans, it may not be suitable in Indian context because we have completely different cultures. Okay, so this is why your psychological tools, psychological tests are relative in nature. It is not universal. So these tests, they need to be modified and adapted keeping in view the characteristics of the context in which they are to be used. So later on, if you take up psychology, then you will come across many psychological tests which are developed in America, but then there are Indian adaptations of those tests. So keeping in mind the culture, the background of Indian people, these tests are adapted into Indian context. Okay, So now the third one here is subjective interpretation of qualitative data. Okay, so I already told you about qualitative data, that it cannot be measured, it cannot be quantified. Okay, so data from qualitative studies are largely subjective, since they involve interpretation on the part of the researcher as well as the person providing data. So in qualitative research study, what happens is that the research work largely depends on the researcher and whoever is providing information or data. Okay, because we do not have a proper method of measurement, or we are not using psychological tests here. Okay, so the interpretations may vary from one individual to the other. So the way I am analyzing the data in my qualitative research work may vary from another researcher, because it becomes subjective. It's all in the hands of the researcher and the one who is providing information, so it becomes subjective, so it lacks objectivity. It is therefore often suggested that in case of qualitative studies, the fieldwork should be done by more than one investigator, who at the end of the day should discuss their observations and arrive at an arrangement before finally giving it a meaning. So in qualitative research, what happens is that the researcher has to take help of some other person from the same field, that if the way he or she is analyzing the data is correct or not. You have to get second, third opinions. Okay, and at times you have to consult with your respondents also, that the way I'm analyzing the data, the way I'm interpreting the information that you have provided me, if it is correct or not. So you have to do these extra processes. So till now we have studied various methods of psychological inquiry, measurement, how to do research work, but then there is one thing which is really important when you are conducting some kind of a research. Okay, so ethics. Okay, ethics are moral principles. So we all know that ethics and moral principles are important everywhere, in every kind of settings, in every kind of work. We have to follow certain kinds of protocols. So in research work also there are some important ones. So the first one is voluntary participation. Okay, so this principle states that the persons on whom you want to conduct the study should have the choice to decide whether to participate or not to participate in the study. So suppose if I want to conduct a study on you all. Okay, so I will need your voluntary participation. I cannot force you to do that. Okay, I cannot say that you have to participate in my study. There cannot be force or coercion. So you have to give your consent voluntarily. You have to participate in the research study. So this is one. This is the first point. Then the second one is informed consent. So it is essential that the participants in a study should understand what will happen to them during the study. The principle of informed consent states that potential participants must receive this information before data from them are collected, so that they make an informed decision about the participation in the study. So what happens is that informed consent is basically it's some kind of information is given to you about whatever is going to happen in your research study. So if I want to conduct a study on you all, then beforehand I'll have to explain to you that what am I going to do with you all. Like I will take some exams, or I will ask you to perform some tasks. So I have to give you all this informations beforehand. Okay, so experiments are also a part of psychological research study. So in some experiments sometimes some electric shocks are also given. So if you do not tell a person beforehand that you are going to give a person electrical shock, so this is going to be unethical. You have to inform beforehand what you are going to do. Okay, so sometimes some unpleasant stimuli or some harmful substances are also presented for some kind of experiment, so you have to inform beforehand. Okay, so then in the informed consent, if they give their signature or if they agree, then only you can proceed further with your research work. Now for example, I gave the example of that the COVID vaccine example to you all before also. So many participants are participating in trials of this vaccine. So they have to be informed beforehand that we are making this vaccine and you will be injected once or twice in a week. Whatever the information has to be given beforehand, they will have to be given all the informations. Okay, and then only you will have to proceed with the experiment, with the research study. But in some cases, deception, the technique of deception is also used. I think in one of your boxes there was a research given to make you understand about variables, about experiments, right? So there I think I mentioned that some of the participants were not informed about it beforehand, about whatever is going to happen, about the smoke coming from outside. They were not aware whatever is going to happen. So things like that also happen. Sometimes deception is also used. Okay, but there also you have to be very careful about what kind of stimuli you are using if you are using the method of deception. Okay, so everything has to be explained before the study takes place. Even if you are using the technique of deception, then also the participants has to be given certain kinds of instructions that what is going to happen with you all. Okay, if not directly. Then the third moral principle is your debriefing. So once the study is over, the participants are provided with necessary information to complete their understanding of research. So this is particularly important if deception has been used in the study. Like I said, that if the participants were not aware of whatever is going to happen to them, so after the experiment happens or after the study took place, you have to let them know what exactly happened in the experiment and what are the things that they were not aware of. Because at some point of time, some people may be left in some mental state, some unpleasant mental state. Okay, so in that case you have to offer reassurance to your participants. You have to calm down in case if they were anxious because they didn't know what was going to happen in the research study. Okay, so you have to do that, otherwise they will feel that they were deceived by you. Okay, so debriefing, this process is known as debriefing, which happens after the study is over, after the experiment is over. Okay, so now comes the fourth one. So fourth one is sharing the results of the study. In psychological research, after collecting information from the participants, we come back to our places of work, analyze the data and draw conclusions. It is obligatory for the researcher to go back to the participants and share the results of the study with them. So it is very necessary that you study the results of the study with your research population. Okay, because they have certain expectations from you. If you are giving some exam, okay, if you are submitting some kind of assignment, so definitely you expect the results, right? So in cases of research also, you will be expecting the outcomes of the results. So whatever assessment has been done, if it is about your behavior or intelligence or whatever it is, you have, as a researcher, it is our moral duty to go back to the participants and let them know about the results. So this exercise has two advantages. One, you will fulfill the expectations of the participants, and secondly, the participants may tell you their opinion about the results, which sometimes may help you develop new insights. So when you are sharing the results with the participants, then they can also provide their opinions, right? So it may help you to develop new insights, new understanding of the whole research study. So the last one is your confidentiality of data source. The participants in a study have the right to privacy. So if you are the participants of a study, it doesn't mean that all your informations all your informations will be out there and everybody will come to know about you. It doesn't happen that way. It's not ethical. The researcher must safeguard their privacy by keeping the information provided by them in strict confidence. So if I am conducting a research on a particular group of students, so I will keep their identities hidden. In most cases, names, all these things, all these personal informations are not used. Okay, but and it is not passed on to other interested parties. So if I'm conducting a research study on you all, then I won't be giving the data to other third parties, or I won't go and discuss about it to other people. Okay, that confidentiality I have to maintain. And the most effective way of protecting the confidentiality of participants is not to record their identities. Like I said, that I will make sure that I will not write those personal informations in my research study. Okay, so sometimes for record keeping I may ask about personal informations, but then I'm not going to publish it in my research work. I won't write your name. Or sometimes what happens is that while you are writing your research paper, certain personal informations are changed as well to protect the identity of the respondent. Okay, so but it is not possible in certain kinds of research where you have to record personal informations and identities. So in such cases, code numbers are given on the data sheet and the names with the codes are kept separately. Okay, so codes are used and codes are kept separately so that it doesn't spread. The identification list should be destroyed as soon as the research is over. So when the research is over, when the work is done, then the identification list has to be destroyed. So nobody gets a hold of it and uses for other purposes. Okay, so these were the ethics or moral principles which are to be followed in case of psychological research. So with this we come to the end of this chapter. So if there is any confusion or queries, do ask. Thank you.